Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
Eric Forrester's office was unusually quiet that morning, a stillness that seemed to press down on everyone who stepped inside. Even the soft hum of the city beyond the massive windows felt distant, muted under the weight of the tension that had settled over the Forrester mansion. Carter Walton hesitated at the doorway, briefcase in hand as Eric, seated behind his massive mahogany desk, gestured with a weak but urgent wave, beckoning him closer. There was something in the elder Forrester's eyes that immediately struck Carter. Something raw, vulnerable, a pleading that didn't fit the stoic, commanding presence he had known all these years. "Carter," Eric rasped, his voice unsteady in a way that made Carter's chest tighten. I need you to come back. For Forrester." The words hung in the air, weighted with urgency, but Carter couldn't reconcile them with the man he had seen yesterday at the hospital, whose pulse had been steady, whose doctor had nodded and said there was no cause for immediate alarm. Yet the fear, the seeming frailty in Eric's gaze, was enough to make Carter's mind spin. "Eric, Carter began, but Eric held up a hand, cutting him off with a sense of finality that was almost theatrical. "No, listen to me. This is important. You have to hear me. I know you're busy, I know life goes on, but I need you. For Forrester. The company, the family. It's all fragile right now. And I need you to help fix it. I need you to come back." Carter's mind raced as he tried to parse Eric's words. There was a sharpness to the plea, a weight behind it that suggested he wasn't bluffing. Yet instinctively he knew something wasn't adding up. Eric Forrester, the man who had faced corporate battles, heartaches, betrayals, and losses with an almost superhuman resilience, was suddenly pleading, begging, even like a man at the edge of some unseen cliff. Carter swallowed hard, unsure whether to trust his eyes or his intuition. Eric's eyes, though, were steady now, focused, almost accusing, as if they could see straight through to Carter's soul. He could feel the invisible pull of the Forrester legacy, the unspoken duty that had always hovered over him whenever he stepped into the orbit of the Forrester clan. And then came the subtle, almost imperceptible quiver in Eric's voice. I don't have much time left. That's why I need you to step back in, to steer the ship while I leave it in your hands." Carter's stomach turned. The words were a knife's edge, designed to jolt him, to pull him into the drama of the moment, to make him act without thinking. "Eric, wait, you're not dying," Carter said, his voice a mix of disbelief and rising frustration. Eric's lips twitched in a faint, almost guilty smile. Not really," he admitted, his tone faintly conspiratorial, like a man sharing a secret that only Carter was supposed to know. "But it had to sound real. Had to make you feel it, understand it. Sometimes, Carter, the only way to get through to you, to get you to act, is to show the urgency you'd never otherwise see." Carter's hands fell to his sides, dropping the briefcase almost instinctively as his mind tried to catch up with the revelation. You tricked me?" he asked, disbelief mixing with anger, but also a strange sense of relief. Yes, in a way," Eric admitted, leaning back in his chair, letting out a sigh that seemed to carry decades of weariness and cunning in equal measure. "But the company, the family, everything is in a delicate position, Carter. You've always been my right hand, my trusted partner, and right now, I need that more than ever. I need you to come back." Carter studied him, the room feeling suddenly smaller, almost suffocating under the weight of the mix of urgency and misdirection Eric had created. It was classic Forrester, dramatic, manipulative, yet undeniably effective. "And what about your health? The doctors, the tests?" Carter asked, trying to untangle the web of concern and deception that had been spun around him. Eric waved a hand dismissively, almost brushing the question aside. "It's fine. It's all fine. But I had to make you understand the stakes, to feel them in a way you couldn't ignore. The Forrester legacy. Carter, it can't wait. I need you now." Carter felt the familiar tug of loyalty, the magnetic pull of responsibility, mixed with a complex brew of irritation, admiration, and exasperation. It was infuriating, brilliant, and entirely Eric. "You really had me going there," Carter said finally, letting out a slow breath, the tension easing from his shoulders even as a shiver of unease ran through him. "You know I don't respond well to tricks," he muttered, though the edge in his voice softened when he glanced at Eric's earnest, almost pleading expression. Eric leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the edge of the desk, his face a study in calculated vulnerability. Sometimes, Carter, life, business, family, it all comes down to moments like this. Moments where we have to act, even when we're not sure what's real and what's not. That's why I needed you to feel it, to see it, to understand that without you things could spiral. And I couldn't bear the thought of it. Carter nodded slowly, the words sinking in. The Forrester legacy wasn't just about money or power. It was about the family, the delicate balance of personalities, the way every action could ripple through lives and hearts in unpredictable ways. And Eric, for all his manipulations and theatrics, knew exactly how to harness that weight to get the results he wanted. Carter's jaw tightened as he realized the truth. Eric hadn't just been faking illness. He had been orchestrating a masterclass in urgency, in influence, in human psychology, knowing exactly how to trigger loyalty, responsibility, and guilt in the men and women around him. Fine, Carter said finally, his voice firm, the mixture of frustration and resolve clear. I'll come back. But this better not become a habit, Eric. Eric's smile widened slightly, a glimmer of mischief returning to his features, but the underlying warmth, the genuine affection and trust, never left his eyes. I wouldn't dream of it, Carter. But thank you. Really. For everything. Outside the office, the bustle of the Forrester headquarters carried on, oblivious to the drama unfolding within. Designers hurried to meetings, assistants juggled schedules, and somewhere, in the back, Ridge and Brooke were arguing over the latest collection launch, completely unaware that the true pivot point of the company's fate had just been secured through a delicate blend of cunning, loyalty, and a well-timed performance. As Carter left Eric's office, briefcase back in hand, mind buzzing with the events of the morning, he realized that, with Eric at the helm and him back by his side, the Forrester legacy was far from over. But in typical Forrester fashion, it was clear that the road ahead would be full of twists, schemes, heartbreaks, and triumphs that would test every ounce of resilience, courage, and loyalty he possessed. And as he walked down the marble hallway, passing portraits of past generations, Carter knew that, for better or worse, he was exactly where he needed to be. Meanwhile, Eric leaned back, the faintest trace of a satisfied smile playing at his lips, already calculating the next steps, the next dramas, the next moves in a world where every heartbeat, every glance, and every word could change the course of not just a company, but countless lives entwined in the dizzying, thrilling, exhausting whirlwind that was the Forrester family, and Carter, for all his protestations, was right at the center of it, where he belonged, ready to take on the storm, even if he still half wondered whether Eric was truly on his last legs, or if this had all been, once again, another Forrester performance, perfectly timed, perfectly calculated, and utterly impossible to resist. As Carter walked down the long, gleaming hallway of Forrester Creations, his mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Relief that Eric was not actually on his deathbed, frustration at being manipulated, and a renewed sense of responsibility for the company he had grown up knowing was more than just a business. It was the lifeblood of a family whose dramas rivaled any Hollywood script. The hum of activity around him felt oddly muted, the usual bustle of designers and assistants suddenly secondary to the weight of the secret he now carried and the commitment he had reluctantly reaffirmed. He passed the familiar offices, each one a capsule of past conflicts and triumphs. Ridge's office with its impeccable organization and hint of Ridge's perfectionism, Brooke's warm chaos of colors and designs reflecting the emotional intensity that always seemed to trail her, and Steffi's modern sleek space that mirrored her drive and determination, sometimes bordering on ruthlessness. As he approached the main conference room, he noticed Donna seated at the head, talking with a few executives, her brow furrowed in that particular way she had when trying to hold a storm of concerns together. Donna looked up and caught his gaze, a mixture of relief and curiosity flickering in her eyes, sensing immediately that something significant had transpired. Carter's footsteps slowed, his thoughts spinning. How to even begin explaining the carefully orchestrated ruse that Eric had played, the delicate balance of truth and theatrical urgency that had pulled him back into the fold. Yet before he could step into the room, the sound of voices from the CEO's office carried down the hall. Ridge and Brooke, their argument cutting like a knife, voices sharp with tension, every word dripping with frustration, worry, and a hint of past wounds that had never truly healed. Carter paused, sensing the subtle undercurrent of emotional turmoil. It was impossible for any part of Forrester Creations to remain unaffected when Ridge and Brooke clashed, and today was no exception. Ridge's voice was low, but each syllable carried the weight of authority and hurt. "Brooke, you don't understand. We have to move carefully with the collection launch. There's a lot at stake and one wrong step could—" Brooke interrupted, her tone a mixture of exasperation and pleading. "Ridge, we have to consider the human element. It's not just numbers and designs. It's lives, careers, relationships. Can you see that, even for a moment?" Carter's heart sank as he realized that, despite all the corporate intrigue and financial maneuvering he had endured, the real battles here were human, emotional, tangled with pride, love, and ego in ways no spreadsheet could capture. He felt the familiar twinge of helplessness, tempered by the knowledge that he now had a renewed mandate from Eric, a license of sorts to steer, to intervene, to mediate, to fix what was fraying at the edges of this storied family's empire. Stepping into the conference room, Carter felt the subtle shift in atmosphere. The tension, the anticipation, the unspoken recognition that the wheels of Forrester Creations might just pivot on his decisions now. Donna's eyes met his, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, as if the complicated web of loyalty, strategy, and personal investment was understood without a single word. He took a deep breath, summoning the resolve he had honed over years of navigating crises, both corporate and personal, and addressed the room, voice calm but infused with the authority that Eric had entrusted to him. "Everyone," Carter began, pausing to let the gravity of his words sink in, "I've just returned at Eric's request. There are developments, and while the details are complex, what's clear is that the company, our family, and the people who rely on us need steady hands and clear decisions. I'm here to provide that." The room was silent for a heartbeat, each person processing the weight of his declaration, the implications of Eric's manipulation, and the potential shifts in power that Carter's renewed presence suggested. Steffi, seated at the far end, crossed her arms, her gaze sharp, analytical, assessing not just Carter but the underlying currents that had brought him back. She spoke, tone measured but firm. "Carter, it's good to see you. But what does this really mean for the plans we've already set in motion? For the projects, for the team?" Carter nodded, anticipating the question. "It means we need to reassess, realign, and ensure that every step we take honors both Eric's vision and the talented people who make this company what it is. Some changes may be subtle, others may be significant, but we move forward together, or we risk unraveling what generations of Forresters have built." Donna's lips curved in a slight smile, though worry lingered in her eyes. "It's going to be a delicate balance," she murmured, almost to herself, but loud enough for Carter to hear. "Eric has a way of making even the most secure of plans feel fragile." Carter's gaze flicked toward the glass doors, beyond which Ridge and Brooke were still in quiet argument, their voices now softened but still charged with intensity. He could feel the pull between them, the love that had endured countless storms, the tension of clashing ideals, and the unspoken fear that one misstep could undo years of family unity. Ridge glanced up as Carter entered, eyebrows raised, the unspoken question of trust and authority hanging in the air. Carter offered a nod, subtle but deliberate, signaling understanding, solidarity, and readiness to step into the role Eric had carved for him. Brooke, eyes wary but warm, allowed herself a faint smile, though the tension in her shoulders suggested that the drama was far from over. "Carter," she said softly, "we'll need to navigate this carefully. There's more at play here than any of us can see right now." He nodded, already calculating the layers of strategy, diplomacy, and emotional intelligence required to mediate the storm. Over the next few hours, the conference room became a hive of activity, a microcosm of the larger drama of Forrester Creations itself. Executives debated product lines, designers argued over creative direction, and Carter found himself moving seamlessly between roles, mediator, strategist, and confidant, deploying his skills to ensure that every voice was heard, every concern addressed, and every potential conflict anticipated. As the day wore on, the faint hum of the city outside seemed to fade further, leaving only the internal rhythm of collaboration, negotiation, and subtle power plays that defined the company. Carter realized that, despite the chaos, despite the occasional friction, there was a deep, undeniable passion in the room, a shared commitment to both family and legacy that transcended petty rivalries. He caught snippets of conversation, Steffi debating with Wyatt over the balance between innovation and tradition, Ridge quietly consulting with a designer about a new line that had potential to redefine the brand, Donna carefully mediating between two competing creative visions, each moment a delicate dance of influence, compromise, and subtle persuasion. Carter found himself reminded why he had loved this company, why Eric had trusted him, why the Forrester legacy was worth fighting for. The hours passed almost unnoticed, each meeting, each decision, each carefully worded sentence contributing to a larger tapestry of stability and progress. By mid-afternoon, the storm of tension had shifted, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. Carter stood by the windows watching the sunlight glint off the skyscrapers and allowed himself a small, private moment of reflection. Eric's plan, risky, theatrical, and undeniably manipulative, had worked. He had been drawn back into the fold, not by threat, not by obligation, but by the intricate interplay of trust, loyalty, and the undeniable force of Eric's personality. Yet even as he allowed himself that brief satisfaction, Carter knew that the road ahead was filled with challenges, hidden rivalries, unforeseen betrayals, and the constant tug of personal emotions against professional responsibilities. He understood that the Forrester family's greatest strength, their passion, their ambition, their brilliance, was also their greatest vulnerability. Every decision could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that were unpredictable, sometimes devastating, sometimes inspiring. And as he looked across the room, catching Ridge's quiet concentration, Brooke's poised intensity, Steffi's calculated determination, and Donna's steady mediation, Carter felt the unmistakable pull of destiny, the weight of responsibility, and the thrilling, exhausting exhilaration of being exactly where he was meant to be. At the center of the Forrester universe, ready to navigate the chaos, embrace the drama, and honor the legacy of a man who had, in his own uniquely dramatic way, reminded him that sometimes the greatest acts of leadership were not about truth or deception, but about the ability to inspire action, ignite loyalty, and bring order to a world where love, ambition, and family were forever intertwined, fragile, and unstoppable all at once. By late afternoon, the air in Forrester Creations had shifted. There was a palpable sense of momentum now, a mixture of cautious excitement and underlying tension that always seemed to follow Carter whenever he took the reins, even temporarily. He had walked the halls, checking in with department heads, offering guidance, and quietly diffusing minor conflicts before they escalated into full-blown disputes. Yet, even as he did so, he couldn't ignore the subtle glances exchanged between Ridge and Steffi, the undercurrent of unspoken judgment, loyalty, and protective instincts that always seemed to bubble to the surface when Carter was involved. Ridge approached him first, the corner of his mouth twitching in that familiar Ridge forging a smile attempt, which Carter knew perfectly well was a mask. "Carter, good to see you back in action," Ridge said, voice level but edged with curiosity. "I have to admit, I wasn't sure how you'd respond to Eric's little drama." Carter offered a faint smirk, the corners of his mouth lifting ever so slightly. "You mean his theatrics?" "Ridge, if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that Eric knows exactly how to get what he wants. I just didn't expect the performance to be quite so convincing." Ridge chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Classic Eric. But seriously, I'm glad you're here. We've got projects in motion that need someone with your steady hand. Brooke and I have been trying to keep things aligned, but it's been complicated." Carter nodded, sensing both the weight and the sincerity behind Ridge's words. He could see the subtle strain in Ridge's posture, the tension that always appeared when family and business collided, and he realized just how much was riding on every decision in that room. "I understand," Carter said, "and I'm here to make sure things stay on track. Not to interfere with the creativity or the vision, but to help manage the chaos that naturally comes with Forrester Creations and the Forrester family." Ridge's expression softened, relief flickering behind his guarded demeanor. "I appreciate that, Carter. Really." Meanwhile, Steffi lingered nearby, arms crossed, observing the exchange with that calculating gaze that always made Carter feel like he was being evaluated, judged, and sometimes subtly challenged at the same time. "Just remember," she said carefully, voice calm but firm, "we're all invested in the company and we all have opinions. I hope you're ready for that." Carter gave her a reassuring nod, meeting her intense gaze. "I'm ready, Steffi. But I also know that the Forrester legacy depends on cooperation as much as vision. We'll need each other, every one of us, to navigate what's coming. As he spoke, a faint smile tugged at Steffi's lips, a mixture of acknowledgement and tentative respect, signaling the beginning of a delicate truce, or at least the promise of one. Outside the conference room, the golden light of the late afternoon sun spilled across the marble floors, casting long shadows and bathing the offices in a warm glow. Carter couldn't help but think that, for all its drama, all its chaos and all its unpredictability, Forrester Creations was exactly where he was meant to be. In the thick of it, balancing the ambitions, emotions and legacies of a family who, despite everything, never failed to inspire him to rise to the challenge.